You can leave that in, Dave, if you want, me claiming that I'm an idiot.
Always.
Hey, welcome back to another episode of the Who Dat Jedi podcast, and a special episode. We got a guest with us again tonight. We'll get to him in a second here, but broadcasting as per normal right now, new normal, whatever, from various parts of the New Orleans metro area. As always, is Aaron and Dave and Fredo. Everybody say hello.
Hello.
And joining us tonight, it's awesome. We've got a special guest. Bill Arceneaux is an independent film critic local to New Orleans. He is an SEFCA member, Rotten Tomatoes approved. I want to know what goes into that later. And he has written pieces for several publications, including Big Easy Magazine, Film Threat, Occupy.com, Dig Baton Rouge Magazine, and the Hammond Daily Star. We want to welcome Bill to the Who Dat Jedi podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, no, this is awesome. This is awesome. We love having fresh blood to argue with and to challenge us and everything.
Trust me, I'm more gristle than blood.
So anyway, how's everybody doing? Everybody have a good week?
Yeah, it's going fine, man.
Dave, have you guys lost power with any of the power outages uptown?
Oh man, not yet. Knock on wood. But yeah, it's been rough and tumble because like we're all on our laptops. Kate and I working from home, and then all the kids are now they started back up with school today. So like each of us is like furiously typing on a laptop while this lightning is striking, 2 blocks away from us. But nobody got electrocuted today, so I call it a win.
Every storm this week in the last couple of days has like gotten right up to like the border of Gentilly and then just went away. Today was the first time that we got any amount of rain out of any of the stuff that's been going on this week. It's been crazy. So,
I've had nothing but lightning. I mean, the storms don't last long with me, but it's mostly the rumbling, the shaking, and then the lightning flash.
So yeah, it's been weird.
Almost like, please don't knock me out. No. And that's
I just interrupted Fredo when the audio went dead. We're
yeah, no, that's gonna be a running gag today. Cox Cable has decided that I don't need internet as much as other people.
So I will do that. If I hear dead air, I'll jump in there. I was in a band for a while, and this is one of my favorite stories. It's not really about filling dead air, but it's we're playing a gig. I played in an Irish band, and that night we all show up to the place, and our banjo/mandolin player had a colonoscopy earlier that day, and so he was kind of groggy from that. And our whistle player, his wife was hit by a car earlier that day.
Wow.
So he was kind of, just kind of not there. And so the guitar player and I, so we're playing the gig, and we're in the middle of just an Irish tune set. So it's all instrumental stuff. And there's usually 3 tunes in a set, each played 3 times. And as we're playing this tune, and the mandolin player, he's the one who had the colonoscopy, he's just flying along playing this tune. And he turns to me, and I'm playing my drum, and he turns to me and goes, "What's the next tune in the set?" I was like, I don't know. I'm the drummer, I'm like, so I look at this, I was like, all right, it's Father Kelly's. And as he's playing the tune, he's just looking up in the air. He turns to me and goes, "I don't know how that goes." And I was like, well, we got, about another time and a half through this tune. It'll come to you. Muscle memory is great. And we get to Father Kelly's. And by the way, Mike and I are the only ones having this conversation. The whistle player has no idea this is going on. The guitar player has no idea this is going on. And we get to the next tune, Father Kelly's, and Mike doesn't know any note. He just starts improvising this tune. Guitar player is just clueless. He's playing the chords to Father Kelly's, And it's all fitting because Mike is just improvising over it. But the funny one was Greg, our whistle player, is trying to play along with Mike, and he's like, "Ooh-loo-loo." He looks at his flute, and and he looks at Mike, and he just sets his flute down, picks up a shaker, and starts playing it. So we got really pretty adept at filling in the gaps when needed. So anyway, that's all right. That's Irish music at the Who Dat Jedi podcast.
Yes.
We actually there was a little bit of that going on in my house on Monday. I had a couple friends from the Irish music session come out and play music on my back porch, so that was fun. Felt somewhat normal. So anyway, on to Star Wars, and I'm going to hustle through the trivia because we've got one of the best news stories of the year, I think, coming up. Right, Fredo?
Yes, it leads to stories.
Oh my goodness, I got giddy over this one. So anyway, but we are going to do trivia, and Bill, you can't opt out. We're going to give you a question, but we're not going to make you start. So I'm going to go with Dave first. And by the way, this is from the Star Wars Trivial Pursuit DVD edition. So anyway, it covers episodes 1 through 6. No Disney stuff.
Okay, but this is the special edition Lucas third cut of the trivia.
Yeah, most likely, yes.
I think we got into an argument over one of the questions at one point. It was like, is this the special edition?
Yeah, we're kind of nerdy every now and again. Okay, so Dave, how many horns protrude from the head of the average Gamorrean guard as opposed to the unaverage Gamorrean guard? I'm going to look at my action figure. How many horns?
All right. Well, I think it's probably either 2 or 4. I'm gonna go with 2.
Gamorrean. That's an MCU thing, isn't it?
It's Gamora.
Yes.
Gamora, yeah.
I just want to throw a little wrench in there.
Well, everybody should be impressed that I knew that because they made me watch all of the Marvel movies during this pandemic. That was part of my homework.
Lucasfilm, Marvel Studios, it's all Disney now. It's fine.
Dave, yes, it is 2 horns.
Ooh.
2 horns.
Ooh.
Way to go. You're smarter than the average Gamorrean guard. Okay. All right. So, Fredo, we'll go to you next.
Okay.
What does the Death Star's thermal exhaust port lead directly to? What does the Death Star's thermal exhaust port lead directly to?
It sounds like a trick question. The thermal exhaust?
That's your answer?
Yeah.
It goes to the reactor.
Oh, okay.
I was going to say, if you would have asked me, it's just a small port right above the main port. But yes, it goes to the reactor. So
I'm feeling some heat right now because these are so specific within even more specified trivia questions. Like I was a big Star Wars fan in the 90s. I'm still a Star Wars fan now, but goodness gracious! I mean, I'm like William Shatner on that SNL episode where he was speaking to the Star Trek fans. Guys, it's just a TV show. Get over it.
One of the best things I ever saw was Anthony Daniels. This is at the first Star Wars celebration in Denver.
Oh no!
And he was doing this whole spiel, and somebody he was interviewing somebody in the audience, and they were saying how they spoke Huttese, and he's like, I thought only Star Trek people did that. It was like, yeah, it was a major burn.
I bet Anthony Daniels got a kick out of that though, because I mean that guy's just all Star Wars dedicated completely.
Yeah.
You know?
All right, well, Bill, here comes your question. Who fires a blaster bolt that ricochets off the walls of the trash compactor?
Doesn't everyone? That's. I'm gonna go with. I mean, you mean first, or because I want to say like both Luke and Han do that, and maybe even Chewie.
See, you're as nerdy as the three of us. I will say the one that we see. How about that?
Oh, the one that we see. Oh goodness, who would be brash enough and macho enough to think that a blaster could penetrate a trash compactor, especially one something as awesome as the Death Star that no one could penetrate and explode at all, especially not a rebellious group of kids. I guess I'm gonna have to go with Han, but part of me wants to say Luke, but I'll go with Han.
It is Han Solo, but Luke did say he already tried. So
yes, okay, all right. They established that. Okay, all right, yeah. All right.
So my question is, what item do Luke and Han each don before battling TIE fighters in the Falcon's gun turrets? And those are communication headsets, right? Yeah, it says a headset. Right on. Cool. All right. Well, that's trivia for today. That just gets our Star Wars juices running here and gets us in the right mindset.
I'm flowing right now.
So, but we got to get to some news, Fredo. And are we going to lead with the best thing?
We should lead with the best thing, since I don't know how long my internet will decide to crap out,
All right,
or McClunky out next. So let's go with, coming this November to Disney Plus, you will get the Lego Star Wars Holiday Special.
Oh no!
Oh
yes.
Yes. Now, here's the interesting thing. It's not a remake of the original.
Oh, boo.
they couldn't get P. Arthur.
It's an animated 4D adventure that's going to see Rey, Finn, and Poe and Rose help Chewie race back to Kashyyyk in time to celebrate Life Day with his family. So it's kind of a retelling of the original.
It's a retelling slash spin-off, maybe sequel. I don't know, because he's already celebrated Life Day. Yeah.
Well, it's a younger thing.
It sounds like the Force Awakens version of A New Hope.
Right?
But better, because it's a Lego
reboot. It's a Disney soft reboot of the holiday special, but without B. Arthur.
So what's really cool though is this is actually post Rise of Skywalker. Mm-hmm. So that's interesting. But do we know, are they getting the actual voices, or is it going to be people imitating Finn, Rey, Poe, and
as far as we know, it seems like it's going to be the cast members lending their voices.
I don't know. I mean, they didn't like Finn Boyega. Didn't he say that he was done?
But as a musician, I mean,
never say never.
If there's a gig and there's free food and beer and a paycheck, you take it. So
yeah, that's how they're going to pay off Boyega, the guy that went on these great righteous tweet threads about corporate takeovers and race relations and stuff. No, we're just gonna throw cash at him.
So just FYI, the story goes, I'm taking this from Gizmodo, which broke it today, says it's gonna follow Rey and BB-8 exploring an ancient Jedi temple on a spiritual quest through time and space, which allows her to interact with Star Wars ghosts of life days past, present, and future.
Oh. Okay.
And she'll be able to interact with both heroes and villains of the light and dark side, from younger versions of Luke and Obi-Wan to even Palpatine and Kylo Ren.
Oh.
And you could only get away with this with Lego. You can only get away with this with Lego.
Yes.
I think this is actually genius, because if they do it live action, then it's just the holiday special all over again. But with Lego, you have the okay to be campy. You have the there's
it can be silly.
Yeah, I'm all for this. I am all in.
So my question is, do you think?
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just going to say that for certain they're not going to bring in Phil Lord or Chris Miller. You know what I mean? Like after that other stuff.
My question is, do they bring back Lumpy?
Oh gosh. Lumpy will make an appearance. Yeah, Lumpy will be in there. But you know what's funny about this to me? I agree with you, Aaron, because you said like only Lego, because it makes me wonder, did somebody pitch this over at Lucasfilm? I want to resuscitate the holiday special, and it was just, it's a no-go, it's a no-go, it's a no-go. And finally, what if it's Lego? I see the conversation going like that, because it can't be canon, and I think most of the Lego stuff isn't canon, or some of it isn't.
Well, but let's also remember what one of the stories that Fredo was talking about either last week or 2 weeks ago or whatever. They're going to start, at Galaxy's Edge. One of the festivals is going to be around the Christmas time, is going to be Life Day. So they've got to get kids, hyped up about what Life Day is. So this is all, I mean, this isn't like just somebody's pet project. This was, if we're going to be doing these two things have to be linked. If they're going to be doing a Life Day festival, the only people who are going to, well, Brittany and I were talking about this today when this came out. My wife, it's like people our age are going to totally get it on a different level than the kids. Kids are going to dig it because it's Lego and it's Star Wars. And hey, Dad, have you heard about this thing called Life Day? And Dave's going to go, well, let me tell you about how Life Day started. But like I said, with this whole thing with Galaxy's Edge, it's got to be a link. I mean, that's just the way you get kids excited. So
yeah, there definitely is in that sense. And just for the record, when I was chuckling a second ago, I was just imagining you telling your kid, your child, like, let me tell you about Life Day, with like a bottle of bourbon, and you're swigging. You know what? When you work 9 to 5, kid, that kind of thing, and you start getting into a rant, and it's like, well, wait, Dad, what does this have to do with Star Wars?
Back in my day, before it was Jefferson Starship, it was Jefferson Airplane.
Yeah. Life Day is a lot like women. And then the kid's like, what? And they're like, never mind, I'm going to stop right there.
All right, moving on then.
Yes.
Speaking of.
Yeah, we lost you for a bit, Fredo.
Yeah, we lost you.
No. Oh, I apologize. Like I said, Cox, thank you. McClunky, anyway. Yeah.
This podcast brought to you by
McClunky.
Yes, okay.
Yeah, so anyway, so Adria Arjona is joining the cast of Cassian Andor. It's been confirmed. She's an actress who was just in the Netflix movie Six Underground. And she is taking, it's going to be part alongside Diego Luna, Stellan Skarsgård, Genevieve O'Reilly. They haven't specified what her role's going to be, what her name's going to be, etc. Just that she's joining the cast.
Well, that's very cool about. I don't know much about this actress. I know Six Underground from Netflix, the Michael Bay, Ryan Reynolds, crazy super magnet movie. But but I do know Stellan Skarsgård, not personally, of course, but I know of him, and that sounds really cool. I didn't know he was going to be doing a Star Wars movie. I almost feel like as excited as when I heard. Well, maybe not as excited, but a little excited as when I heard of Werner Herzog being in The Mandalorian. So that's
right. Which the good thing, the thing I'm noticing is that it's progressing. They're moving towards filming. They're moving towards stuff, which actually I'll tap into next, because Diego Luna was being interviewed because he's coming out with a Netflix series, I believe, a documentary series, kind of a sit around a table and talk about topics series. And they asked him about Cassian Andor, and he says, shooting is starting around the world, so slowly we're going back, but there's no rush. So there is an expectation that they are going to get back onto sets pretty soon, as we discussed, I believe, last week, and get back into production.
I did actually, on a kind of a tangent, I saw is like filming starting back up in Louisiana. Did I see an article about that?
Yeah, there's been some articles about. To me, it's almost a little bit of a miscommunication thing. There have been articles saying that it's beginning to open back up, but I haven't read any confirmation that anything is actually being done yet. Anything being shot yet. My good friend of mine, Casey Moore, who's a professional, production guy. He works in a lot of offices and does a lot of stuff like that in behind the scenes stuff on sets here in the area. And he went on a little bit of a thread where he said there's a difference between opening things back up and then giving proper licenses and going through all the legal processes for getting films back in the area. So it seems like there's still a couple more steps to take, you know.
Yeah, and I think that's what's interesting is that they know that they have to get going in order to meet whatever deadlines Disney needs it to meet. So they're slowly but surely ramping up productions.
You know, too, I did want to mention that with the news of the new casting, I think she's Puerto Rican.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Diego talked a little bit about that and just how much it means to continue to have more and more actors who look and sound like him be affiliated with this kind of a property. And I think that's awesome. We talk about representation on this podcast a lot, and we're all for it. And so it's cool. It's another step forward.
Mm-hmm. The con was physically canceled, so the con will happen digitally, so virtually, but it's instead of happening in New York's Javits Center, it's going to happen on YouTube.
And that's New York Comic Con, right?
That's right. Yeah.
The New York Comic Con.
Comic Con.
Comic Con. Okay, I got you. Yeah, well, it's very common for the Comic Con to happen. So.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, it's the new normal in 2020. If you're planning on having a major event, yeah, you're not.
So when is that? When is the New York Comic Con?
October 8th through the 11th.
Right on.
And then last but not least, I'll finish up with the nice news that, if you were thinking of getting a Baby Yoda Bop It, you can also get a Baby Yoda stress toy coming soon.
Oh no! Why would you want to squeeze that poor little guy?
It's pre-order officially.
Don't get me started, Bill. I mean, this is like we're training kids to be abusive to children. That's what we're doing. It's like Baby Yoda Bop It. First of all, it's like let's teach kids to beat a child, and then the next thing is that the stress ball. Let's
squeeze its head.
Squeeze it until its eyes pop out. Yeah, this is disturbing. I don't know what's going on here.
We're not. I don't think we're talking about those weird little toys where the little eyeballs would come out every time you'd squeeze it. I think they're talking about like those balloons that they hand out, and it's like, I'm so stressed.
Yeah, but it's just the head.
Yes. Okay.
It's not a whole Baby Yoda body. It's just the head with the little adorable ears and a cute smile.
That's almost even worse because it's like, could you imagine like a kid that's a little, maybe not disturbed, but definitely creative, and he sticks like a skeleton, a dinosaur skeleton piece up under the head, and it's like, hey mom, here's the spot. I decapitated baby Yoda today.
Yep.
Oh my god.
I don't know why. I don't know who's making these toys.
No, I'm just saying that's probably a small percentage of kids, if not even, maybe not even a small percentage, maybe even like worse, like lower than that would even think of doing something like that. I'm just saying it's open.
Now, that being said, I'm in the 501st and I have Stormtrooper armor and I have Snowtrooper armor, and I would like sometime to have Biker Scout armor. And when I do, you can sure as shooting bet that I'm going to have a little messenger bag with a little stuffed Baby Yoda in there. So when I'm trooping, I can walk around and punch the bag every now and again. So
did they do that in The Mandalorian? I don't remember that happening.
Oh my God! Last episode. Yeah,
I guess so. Yeah.
The Biker Scouts beat Baby Yoda. Yeah.
Oh right. The Biker Scouts. I thought you were like, I'm gonna dress as a Biker Scout, but I'm gonna pretend I'm the Mandalorian. So why would I hurt Baby Yoda?
That would be far too confusing.
Hey man, look, I'm a critic and I'm OCD, so it's like I have to overanalyze these things. Like, wait a minute, you're this, but you're also that.
It's already bad enough that when people who are dressed as TIE fighter pilots, people come up and say, "Man, that's the worst Darth Vader costume I've ever seen."
It's like, I'm not Darth Vader.
Hand to God, that happens to them all the time. They're like, "Oh, you're Darth Vader," or "That's the worst Darth Vader costume I've ever seen." It's like,
damn it, Thomas, I'm never going to be Darth Vader. I wish I were.
I think I'm ready for a Baby Yoda toy that like you can draw blood on, because like isn't that the next step at this point? It's absurd. Like we're just gonna beat on Baby Yoda repeatedly. It's terrible.
No. There's room for all sorts of merchandise, including those.
Well, yeah. If you can envision it, it exists.
It exists automatically. Yeah, right. Like, hey, that would be a great idea. Hey, while we're talking about this, I'm looking at my Tommy Wiseau bobblehead from The Room. I bought that almost right as I discovered that it existed. They first sent me a T-shirt, and by mistake, and I was like, "Hey, where's my bobblehead?" And they're like, "Oh my God, sorry, it's crazy." And I was like, "Wait, is this Tommy?" And you hang up the phone. That wasn't true, but they did send me a bobblehead, and I'm looking at it right now. I'm like, yes, they will merchandise just about anything, and yeah, Baby Yoda in all interpretations. Yes, Baby Yoda chapstick, Baby Yoda the flamethrower.
By the way, I did see, and I really want to buy one of those ads that pop up on, Instagram or Facebook or anything. But I saw, first of all, the thing I saw most was the T-shirt that said Spaceballs, the T-shirt, and I'm like, I need to have that shirt. Then I saw that was also in the picture was Spaceballs, the face mask. And I was like,
oh, hey, all right.
I was like, oh my goodness, I need that. So I'm gonna have to find that again and order it from God knows where. So
there's a lot of good stuff out there. Yeah, there's a lot of creative stuff out there.
But
so that's it for the news.
Well, thanks for the news, Fredo, and hope your internet gets better. But let's move on to the meat and potatoes of the episode tonight, and we're gonna kind of pick the brain of Bill Arceneaux here, our wonderful guest. And I guess I will throw it to Dave to get us rolling on that.
Cool. I thought a natural starting point for us would be to just kind of pick your brain about where the New Orleans film scene looks like at the moment. You mentioned a little bit about how production hasn't really ramped up yet, but what's the state of the union essentially? What does the film fan community look like? How long before we can expect to see productions? All that fun stuff.
Right. Well, as far as the film fan community, I don't know what we call it. I want to say the movie-going culture of New Orleans or even Louisiana in general. Obviously, theaters are closed except in the New Orleans area. There's Zeitgeist right now, although technically that's St. Bernard, but I consider that Metro. And then there's Britannia. Broad just closed up. Chalmette Movies closed up before that, although they're going to come back. Broad is probably even going to do some drive-in stuff. Shotgun Cinema, haven't really heard much from them, but I think they're just kind of doing a waiting game kind of thing. They did, however, take part in virtual cinema stuff when Kino Marquee came out from Kino Lorber Studio. And they and Zeitgeist and Broad kind of teamed up on some virtual cinema stuff. So that was pretty cool. But yeah, right now it's very light except for streaming stuff. That's the big thing, of course. It's like a duh, I have no idea how many people are going to the Britannia right now. I haven't really talked to them about numbers. I do know they're at 15% capacity right now, and I do know they're doing everything they can to make sure they follow every single protocol and then some. Zeitgeist has taken extreme measures, even probably to the point of I don't want to say hurting themselves financially speaking, but definitely going above and beyond what they probably could be doing. I mean, they're offering masks to people who don't have a mask if they want to come in. They've removed seats from their theater, to kind of help really force the idea of social distancing in a movie theater. The other day,
don't we all do that anyway?
No, we
I don't
don't.
want to sit. I don't want to sit by people.
That's the thing about movie theaters. Like even before the pandemic, it was still kind of like like, I don't know. Do I want to sit next to anyone? Like, I don't know who this guy is. I think, as you guys know, AMC theaters are opening back up next week. They're going to start a little rollout at about 100 theaters.
Yeah.
And I got a press release, or actually, no, an invitation to see Unhinged, the Russell Crowe road rage movie, and for a press screening of that. And I was very surprised that they were, I was like, what? How are you guys going to handle this? Are you're opening the theater back up just to us? What are you doing? And they're like, no, we're going to open it up to the public, but this will be just for you guys. And I'm not sure if that's the right decision. I'm in favor of the independent theaters opening up in very limited ways, but it's like this weird, complicated situation where you want your theaters to thrive, you want cinema to be around, but you also don't want people to die because they saw Trolls World Tour.
Your point is really well taken. And as you were talking about it, I started thinking about, why restaurants are open, but bars are not. But movie theaters is one of those things where it's a finite amount of time. The reason why bars right now are closed down is because people stay in bars for a long, long time. Whereas they go into a restaurant, they eat their meal, and then they're out the door. Movie theater is kind of the same way. Yeah, it's 2 hours, but if you can make sure that people are, not sitting right on top of each other.
Well, it better not be date night in that case, because I'm not trying to suggest anything of people. I just, well, actually, when I saw Empire Strikes Back, the special edition in '97, I went to a local multiplex, and I was there with my dad and my brother. My brother was sitting to my left, my dad was sitting to my right, and sitting to my brother's left was a couple, and they were just making out really hard. And
Empire Strikes Back.
And this is the Empire Strikes Back, and I'm thinking like, oh yeah, right, okay, hey, the Empire's really striking back now, buddy, that kind of thing. And, know what I'm talking about? And so my brother is clearly like getting upset about this. He's antsy. He's like, I don't want to be here. So I offered to switch seats. We did, and the couple looks at me and they go, "Thank you." I was like, yeah, sure, fine. And then they continue, chowing down on each other's faces while Darth Vader is looking for his son. Well, we don't know we know, but we don't, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And
Spoiler alert. Yeah.
Spoiler. Oh my God.
That caused them to stop. They stopped at that moment. He's his dad.
No. Yeah.
I guess that kind of leads into kind of our standard question that we ask everybody. Like, what was your introduction and upbringing with Star Wars? What's your earliest Star Wars memory?
My earliest memory was walking in on my brother and my dad watching Rocky IV, specifically the No Easy Way Out montage. So my memory is this collage of Dolph Lundgren bloodied and bruised, and then Rocky bloody and bruised, or no, Rocky driving, and then Apollo Creed falling down onto the crashing into it. So that's kind of how everything kicked off for me. But with regards to Star Wars, it's not really one of the movies. I guess if there was a movie, it would be Return of the Jedi that kind of started it. I guess because that's the more family-friendly one, ish. It was the Ewoks and everything. And I don't remember when I saw that. I was born in '85, so the movie had already come out by that point. All I remember initially was the toys, and specifically my bed sheets, which were Return of the Jedi bed sheets, and we had those for the longest time, well into my teen years. I didn't use them; we just had them, And we eventually gave them to other family members, like, hey, hand me down. You guys want some Return of the Jedi? We didn't really think like this is collectible. We just thought, it's practical. Just use it, And I think they did, or maybe they sold them. I don't know, but But that's how I was introduced to it. I was introduced to it through that and through recorded off TV VHS copies of Empire and Return of the Jedi. I don't think I saw A New Hope until I was old enough to go to the video store. So for the longest time, I only had the 2/3 of the trilogy in my head. I was like, wait, this has a part 1, or part 4 rather. I wasn't aware of that, and of course, when they all came out on video, and then the special editions were announced, I was like, oh my God, this is my chance. I can go see it in the theater. And I remember for the longest time, I had this newspaper clipping from the local paper, and it was an interview or some kind of gossip of George Lucas talking about his ideas for Star Wars, and he mentioned a word. He mentioned a word that stuck out to me because I'd never heard this word before with regards to movies, and it was prequel. I was like, okay, I know sequel, but prequel? What's a prequel? And I was like, oh, this was in 6th grade, and I was like, oh, prequel is before? And I was like, oh, episode 4. So there's 3. I was like, oh, okay. And then, we know what happened from there, but that whole era, 95 to 99, and after that, I guess 95, 99, I was hooked. I was a super Star Wars fan. My mom, every time we go to finish a baseball game, Little League baseball game, we'd go to Kmart or Target or something and stock up on some toys. I think this one lady actually stole a cart of ours that was filled with Star Wars toys. And my mom came home and she was like, I couldn't get you enough Star Wars toys. I was like, well, I didn't ask for them, but why? Well, what happened? And she was like, this lady just stole them, just took the cart. I was like, well, she didn't really steal them. She just, stole them from you, but you didn't buy them. Well, it's a fair game. It's you're playing shop. What's that game show that's now on Netflix? But was Supermarket Sweep. Yes, it's like that. But with Star Wars toys. And I still have. I could probably get it out of my closet now because there's an audio component to this. I have a Star Wars C-3PO case which still has action figures inside, and when you press the button on it, C-3PO talks.
Right on.
Yeah. So what I'm getting at is my introduction to Star Wars was through the advertising and the toys and the exploitation of labor and all that cynical junk, But it wasn't cynical.
Merchandising.
Yes. It wasn't cynical for me at first though, because it was magical, and then part of it still is, even though they're just hunks of plastic that someone made for pennies on the dollar, and then sold for God knows how much, 20, 30, 50 bucks, that kind of thing. But I found it to be very, very cool for what it was, at the time, and to a degree still is. And then from there, I just absorbed as much content as possible. I didn't subscribe to the magazine, but I did seek it out whenever I went to the bookstore, the Star Wars Insider. Yeah, I love that magazine. Man.
Same. Yeah, it was good. Real quick, you mentioned Rocky 4. I will say, and you're a film critic. I will say Rocky 3. One of the most disappointing things in that movie is when Rocky's having the flashback to his first fight with Clubber Lang.
Yeah.
And they show him get like a kidney punch, and he's wearing Apollo's American flag shorts, so it's actually footage from the fight that is coming later, but they used it in the flashback. And yes, that's what made me say in Rocky 3, oh, come on. It was sloppy. Anyway.
Yeah, of everything in Rocky 4, or Rocky 3, I'm sorry. Rocky 4, no, that movie's perfect, but Rocky perfect for what it is. It achieves what it's going for. Rocky 3, for whatever, issues that movie has, you focused on the right things, I think, well, maybe the right things for you, right things for other people, they're like, oh, Rocky and Apollo, they're dancing on the beach. This is like Top Gun. So what? They're having fun. They're frolicking.
I like what you just said though about Rocky IV being perfect in what it sets out to achieve, because it does what it's trying to achieve in that movie.
It defeated communism.
Do you? It's true. Do you evaluate the Star Wars movies in a similar way? I mean, or does nostalgia enter into it for you? Do you have to put on your critic glasses? I mean, like how do you sit there and try to evaluate a Star Wars movie? Because it's just such a big thing.
Yeah, it's so deeply ingrained in global pop culture at this point. You know, it was deeply ingrained the first few years into it, quite frankly. For starters, though, I don't. My critic glasses are the special edition Star Wars glasses that you get with the with every proof of purchase. No. I was trying to do like a thing where you get those those glasses for drinking, like collect all 4 in the case, that kind of thing.
I think those came from Burger King, right?
They might as well have. I don't know if that's
I
true.
have some, yeah.
Oh, okay. I don't judge. I think those are awesome, actually. Again, merchandising, but yeah, when I put those, when I get in that mindset, like, okay, I'm about to watch The Rise of Skywalker. How am I going to review this? Well, there's, I guess, a couple of ways. I think there's no real right way to review a movie, even if, you got people like famous critics, Roger Ebert, Pauline Kael, that had their own methods. And you have critics now who are still alive and are very prominent that have their own methods, but also refer back to the methods of, I guess, their mentors and the people they looked up to. And they say, well, you got to follow those ABC. I don't think that's a bad idea whatsoever, but I also have never written anything that I felt uncomfortable with in terms of it not being a style that I didn't agree with. If it's something that it has to be something that I'm completely on board with. It has to be something that I just let be me. If that makes any kind of sense. I follow the structure of, you start with your opening paragraph, you introduce a thesis, you go on from the body and make your argument, and then you end with the thesis again, and that's your story essentially. And of course, there's a lot of things in between. But when it comes specifically to movie reviews, how would you rate it? What do you analyze? For the longest time, I used to tell people I would review a movie in the way that I would write my autobiography. Like every review for me is like I'm telling a part of myself. And I eventually realized that was kind of full of myself to say. I think I was being lofty for the sake of being lofty. I wasn't realizing that. I was being very pretentious at that time. So now, about a decade into being a professional critic, looking at Star Wars movies, yes, they're big blockbusters at this point. Actually, A New Hope, while yes, it was a blockbuster, it was also, I would say, it still had the independent flair of George Lucas. Despite, years later, he would kind of, I would argue, lose that. Probably just from being exhausted by all the Star Wars crap he had to deal with, the fandom and all these different things. I made The Phantom Menace. What more do you want? That kind of stuff. I'm like, I gotta make more of this. I just want to go to Vietnam and film Apocalypse Now. That was a story, actually. They were going to send him to Vietnam at the end of the war to go guerrilla shoot Apocalypse Now in its early stages. And he was like, yeah, I was really going to do that.
And it later became called Tropic Thunder.
Which was also, oh my goodness, that's provocation right there at its finest. But rating a Star Wars movie, there is a huge level of excitement no matter what you say publicly. There's a lot of critics. There's a group of critics, or actually every critic is referred to on Twitter as being part of film Twitter. And we get together, a big movie comes out, and a lot of people are kind of like, there's this class of people that are kind of critics that are very cynical, oh, what's next from James Cameron? When are you going to finish Avatar 2, 3, 4, and 5, huh? And I'm like, well, okay, but he's really working on it, and that's something. I don't know if it'll be something, but he's working on it, and that says something. And when it comes to Star Wars, a lot of there were, Last Jedi comes out, almost all of film Twitter loved it, except for maybe a small percentage, and of course, a lot of fans hated it. I think a lot of critics liked it because it was different from the other entries in the catalog. And people, this completely changed things from The Force Awakens, and I was like, well, not really. It kind of just took the ball and ran with it, and just it went in a different direction, but it followed that lineage. It was still kind of in a line, in a thread. My thing with Star Wars has always been balancing the Force, so to speak. But the problem is what is balancing the Force? They never really got into that until The Last Jedi, and in which case Luke explained to Rey, the balance is that there is life and there is death, and one can't be more than the other or less than the other, which has a lot of strong implications when you understand that, when it's been articulated finally. Before in the prequels, it was like Mace Windu just says it, and it's like, oh wait, so you guys are the Jedis, you're in charge of the peace of the galaxy, but the Force isn't balanced yet. Like, what does that mean? Are you guys upset that you're too in charge? I don't get it. What's the threat here? So it was a little, how that relates to criticism, in my opinion, is how to balance your excitement and your enthusiasm and your anticipation with the duties of, ultimately being a critic, ultimately analyzing and going, okay, how did this movie make me feel? How do I explain this to readers? How do I make it entertaining enough for readers to get through the article from start to finish without, going over their heads or anything, or feeling like I'm going over their heads? And how do you make it convincing? Although I would argue that's not necessarily always the most important thing. It's important to get it through to the reader that this is how you felt.
Now,
that you express it.
I've said it before on this podcast that when I saw The Last Jedi, my friend who I've known since preschool, he texted me and said, "I'm taking the family to see The Last Jedi, and I'm seeing all these reviews. What am I in for?" He's like, "These aren't the people are not really reacting well," and I said, "It is unlike any Star Wars movie you've ever seen." I said, "So just check your expectations at the door," and that's the lesson that So on one hand, I'm going to say that's the lesson that I learned, and we've talked about a lot on this podcast, is that going into a movie and try to manage your expectations. But on the other hand, Star Wars has built the monster, and it's like, I'm sorry, but you made a trilogy that now every trilogy that's ever made, whether it's Star Wars, Star Trek, or Marvel or whatever, is going to be compared to. So if you don't, and right, wrong, fair, unfair, whatever, that's the way it is. People are going to look at episodes 1, 2, and 3, and how did that match up to 4, 5, and 6? And people are going to look at 7, 8, 9, and how'd that match up to 4, 5, and 6, and 1, 2, and 3? That's what you created. So when you mentioned George Lucas, it's like kind of burnt down on fans and stuff like that. Like I said, dude, you made that monster. It's like, so it's right. It's kind of like the band who is like, oh, we really like this album, but it's like, yeah, but it's it's not the same as the album you did before. It's not as
we
good.
sold out, man. We sold out, man. That kind of thing. Well, I mean, I don't think there's any room to blame anyone for anything except maybe, I guess, Disney. Because they own it now.
Gauntlet
they own
down.
well, I mean, come on. It's kind of like when you're elected president. I'm not mentioning any president in particular. I just mean when you're elected president, if anything goes right, it was because of you. If anything goes wrong, it's because of you. You're kind of elected to be that person, that we all kind of distill everything through. If I lost my job, well, it's because you must have done something or didn't do something, that kind of thing. Same with Disney. No matter what faults are seen in the sequel trilogy, and there are some, of course, but ultimately, yes, it is their fault, as are the successes. Now, we were just talking about, you were just talking about The Last Jedi and expectations. I wanted to say, conclude my, and finally, after my long rambling, answered the question, how do I rate the Star Wars movies now? Obviously, when you're a kid, every Star Wars movie is excellent, even if it's The Phantom Menace. And to this day, I still kind of like The Phantom Menace. I'm going to go out and say something that might be, I'm sure this has been said before, but this might be a little controversial. And I don't know how you guys are going to feel about this, but I feel that The Phantom Menace is the best prequel. That's me.
I agree with you, hands down. Hands down.
I feel okay, good.
Yes, yeah, I agree with you.
I feel like it's the closest to what a Star Wars movie is supposed to feel like. Attack of the Clones felt completely on automatic. It felt like a machine was running it. There was nothing to it. It was like when Anakin is going through that weird droid factory on the insect planet towards the end. And he's running through the machines, and the scene's going on way too long, and it doesn't feel like anything's really happening, and he had just committed genocide like 5 minutes ago. It's like, huh? It felt like it was in front of a green screen or a blue screen, which that's exactly what it was. And not to say that's bad, but it wasn't, because it wasn't reaching me. Then it was bad. It was bad because of that. And then you got Revenge of the Sith, and everyone goes, "Oh, that's the good one." I'm like, well, okay, but did you see Revenge of the Sith? Like, really? I would say it's the second best, of course, but that's not saying much.
Ladies and gentlemen listening to this podcast, Bill was not my choice to have on this podcast, but he's my favorite. Smartest guest we've ever had.
Okay, I don't hate Revenge of the Sith, and quite frankly, I don't hate any of these movies whatsoever. I think there's this social network online for film critics, and really for anyone, called Letterboxd, right? And there's this little rating scale that looks like it's like little blocks, like from 0 stars to 5 stars. And the blocks can look all weird depending on, it's like a graph, can look all weird for, anyone. That kind of represents how you normally rate movies. My scale or graph goes up very steeply from 0 to 5, meaning that I normally rate movies very well. Almost every movie gets some kind of a 3 or in between 3 and 5. So I typically find the best parts of a movie, and I really think that means something to me, more so than most of the other faults. Even if for the most part the movie was bad, I'll still go, that deserves credit because it did that one moment that was very good. And those moments in time, they really mean something because I'm going to remember it. I'm going to hold on to it.
Really quick, sorry, Caddyshack 2?
Yeah. You want me to pull a moment out of that? Yes, I will. Randy Quaid. That's not a moment. That's just a person. I think almost any movie, well, not any movie, Christmas Vacation 2, come on, horrible. But, for the most part, Randy Quaid was like that weird bonkers kind of character actor that he had some range, but for the most part, he would just play weirdos because he is a weirdo. And that was great because he let people film him doing
You're
stuff.
actually finding something good in the worst movie ever made. But anyway, okay, keep going about
that
Star
was
Wars.
that part was good, and so was the opening theme song. Other than that, the rest of it was pretty bad. Dan Aykroyd was pretty good. Oh, Mr. Westinghouse or Mr. Esterhouse, I run a little hot dog stand.
That's pretty decent.
It was burritos or whatever. He was making some weird concoction that it wasn't even like a one thing or the other. He just threw it all in a flour tortilla and gave it to the dude from from Unsolved Mysteries. Right, yeah, right. He gave it to that guy, and the guy's just baffled. He's like, why am I standing here in front of Dan Aykroyd talking like a crazy person? And it's like, well, because Dan Aykroyd is a crazy person. Have you ever seen him on CNN talking about aliens not coming here because of 9/11? What?
Well,
that doesn't. No. Anyway, Star Wars, yes.
Star Wars. I wanted to interrupt briefly just to say I really like what you brought up about Last Jedi. Specifically how critics really genuinely liked it, because I think like there was this online campaign against that movie that talks about how these critics were being bought off by Disney to make positive reviews for this movie that was clearly awful. And I really appreciate hearing, no, they just wanted something different. Because critics see a million movies every year. They're going to get tired of just seeing the same thing recycled over and over and over and over. So, for that reason alone, just the fact that the movie's original, I think that had a lot to do with why critics really enjoyed that one.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But I want to kind of clarify here. A good critic doesn't want to be catered to. It's not. You really shouldn't go into any movie with a particular expectation. You should always want those expectations to be exceeded. You want it to be better than the last time you went to a movie theater. Sometimes it's like gambling. It's not always going to work out in your favor or in that favor, but when it does, I mean, that'll get you through even the worst moments in your life, and Star Wars is meant that way to a lot of people, and they don't want that to go away. So when they see something like The Last Jedi, they get scared. Like, this movie's answering questions, that I thought were already answered. Like, what is the balance of the Force? What exactly does it mean to always be having this endless war of the stars? Like, what is the war? Who's capitalizing off of what? What's this? What's that? Is this ever going to end? And I think people legitimately, fans, got scared by that because it wasn't a traditional Star Wars film. It was doing things vastly different than what had been done in the originals and even, of course, the prequels. It was flipping the script, so to speak. It was a real challenge to them. And I don't mean to say that was a challenge to intelligence. I'm not saying that was a challenge to anything other than expectations. And I think a lot of fans then jumped on board when other fans started talking about it online, and then that kind of just snowballed from there. So I guess distilled down, what I look for in a Star Wars movie is encapsulated within The Last Jedi, and that is also what I look for in every movie, and that is I want my expectations to be exceeded, even if it's just by a little bit, just that one little aspect in a movie that I will remember forever. Like for example, it's almost like a muscle memory or a genetic memory. Like I might be making a sandwich or doing something mundane, and then I'll make a gesture. And immediately in my mind, I will remember a gesture from a movie. And this sounds really weird and bizarre, but I'll remember a gesture from a movie, and that will kickstart a scene from a movie or a moment from a movie that I remembered. And I'll kind of think on that and go, oh, yeah. I get those quite often throughout every day, and there's so many great movies out there. And a lot of times I'll think of Star Wars, of course. When I was in middle school, I used to think of the Millennium Falcon or one of the Rebel X-wings, blasting off into a hyperdrive. Or that's a Star Wars word, right? It's not warp. Warp is Star Trek. Okay, I just no. When I was in middle school, I would whenever I was walking to class, I always recognized that I kind of walked a little bit faster to get ahead of everyone, and I would immediately think of the X-wings getting away from the TIE fighters, and I kind of would think in my head the song, that kind of thing, and that kind of stuff. No matter what anxieties I had that week, that month, that year, that day, whatever, that kind of stuff would get me through it. And so I would imagine for a lot of fans, for a lot of moviegoers, they feel the same way. For me, I feel that way. And that's exactly what I look for in a movie. Last Jedi completely 100% sums up what I look for in these Star Wars movies. That being said, by the time The Rise of Skywalker came around, I was friggin' exhausted.
Yeah. I think a lot of people were.
The
filmmakers were exhausted.
Everyone, really. I mean, I didn't see that movie for I don't know how many weeks. And normally I see a Star Wars movie like right off the bat. Like I'm there, I saw The Phantom Menace a couple times when it came out. The first time being the midnight before the actual, technically it was the minute it was supposed to be released that day, and we just got in to the theater at the last minute before they were done selling tickets. And while I did think this is not a movie that I would have thought would fit in well with the original trilogy, it still felt like a Star Wars movie. Like I'm watching this and I'm like, what's the Trade Federation? How come that guy from Superman 2 was in there for 5 seconds? What? How come that kid can't act? But then the next moment, the Duel of the Fates, or even the cutting back and forth to those 4 stories, Anakin being in space heading to the Trade Federation station, the Gungans versus the droids, the Queen leading the security guards into the castle or the palace, and then of course the Jedi. A lot of people had a problem with that cutting to each one, almost like it was madness. I actually liked that. I followed that completely, and I was hooked. I actually was. Even Jar Jar had like the only real, as far as all the shit that he gets, character arc. And now they didn't do it well because there were little things he did that showed cowardice, even in the moments when he was supposed to show bravery. Most of his bravery came from accidents. But he still went from being a super coward to being kind of more of a normal person who may have some timidness to them, but also capable of bravery. So that movie still had plenty of moments in it. And, I think if a movie can exceed even the smallest of expectation, there's something to it, and those are the kind of things I look for. I hope that that long-winded thing that started 30, 40 minutes ago kind of sums it up.
One of the things I thought about is kind of similar to what my brother was talking about when he was a guest of ours on the podcast. The thing is, a lot of us saw Star Wars at a very, episode 4. I mean, at a very influential age, and it was also a movie that broke boundaries. On a, from in many respects. And so Star Wars now is very much like the car, where nobody really, it's, it's every car is pretty much the same car, even though, mine might be a couple of years newer than somebody else's, but it's still basically the same car. You know what I mean? It's not like the first time that, Henry Ford drove this thing out and said, "Hey, look at this." And everybody went, "Holy crap, what is that?" And then after that, it's just like, "Oh, look, now we got cup holders." So
well, seatbelts, I think
that doesn't make any of these cars bad. Doesn't make Star Wars bad, but I think a lot of these movies have been unfairly judged against something that was groundbreaking. You know, so it's like, yeah,
it's like an albatross in a way.
Well, yeah, it's kind of like comparing various Saints seasons to the Super Bowl season. It's like, well, it's
you can't compare them. It's because you had that long era of everyone wearing paper bags on their heads, the really super hardcore Saints fans, and almost everyone else, thinking the Saints were a complete joke. Even us, all of us thinking they were kind of a joke, but they were our team. There was still that pride. Like, oh, let's maybe one year. Maybe if we cheered just a little harder than last year. And then lo and behold, we started having a couple of good seasons, and then boom, and that was wonderful. Side note too to that, I was recording that Super Bowl, and then I recorded the stations afterwards. This was all on VHS, by the way, that I was recording that well past VHS being dead, so to speak. And I still have a VCR. Yes, I do. And I was flipping through the local channels, like, anytime they were done with the commercials and they were going back to the people on the street. And this one, I forget which channel, it may have been WWL, but this guy is interviewing this clearly intoxicated but happy woman, and she says F them Colts, and he's like, why would you say that? And she's like, I said, who dat? I was like, all right, that was so cool, and I was really impressed with the fact that we didn't have any full-scale riot. It was just complete celebration and jubilation, and I was like, that's exactly New Orleans right there. We're defying those expectations. You think we're gonna break out into war? No, we're gonna just pop open the champagne, buddy. Or the daiquiris, whatever. We'll break open those jugs of daiquiris, those milk cartons of daiquiris.
It speaks to a point, though, that we're talking about, by comparison, every other Saints season next to that one looks kind of mediocre. But do you think that enters the picture for critics when they're evaluating movies like this? It's like, I grew up on A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back, and those are the two greatest movies of all time. And so I'm going to be extra harsh on the newer films.
Oh, I see. So your question is, do I think that's reasonable, or?
Well, I mean, do you see it going on, and what do you think of it?
Oh, you mean what do I think of it? And post sequel trilogy, do I think it has legs? That kind of philosophy. I'm not in favor of it. For starters, thinking that you can just compare. It's easy to do. Don't get me wrong, and and there's nothing really wrong. It's just natural that you're going to go, well, Jurassic World is not Jurassic Park, so we shouldn't be holding it to that standard, but you're going to hold it to that standard no matter what, just by comparison's sake. Like Spielberg clearly did what Trevorrow couldn't do. I'm like, well, Trevorrow came off of Safety Not Guaranteed. Like, right. That was a small independent movie, and now he's not that a director can't go from one thing to another, but we're talking like going from something that was the scale of a regular person to the scale of a T-Rex, like that's just a big jump. And now, of course, he eventually did the Book of Henry, and
he didn't help himself there.
In all fairness, in that scenario, the premise is bonkers. So by virtue of being bonkers, there's some value there. And B, or two, I forget if I said one or A. It doesn't matter. They both are applicable. The book, it was based on a book that was exactly that, bonkers. So, I mean, what do you want them to deviate? how are you going to clean that up for a movie? So I'm just trying to establish too with Trevorrow, if we do talk about him later, or if you guys ever do talk about him later, that maybe he had written something good for Rise of Skywalker. I don't know. There's a whole thing about that, the Duel of the Fates screenplay. But as far as that, comparing movies to other movies that are either similar or are part of the same continuity or whatever, It's only natural, just as what Palpatine told Anakin in Episode 3. It is only natural, you know. And indeed it is. But of course, saying that coming from a Sith Lord, or as Palpatine would say, a Sith Lord. He's a Sith Lord. I bet you anything, the dude, the actor, and I can never pronounce his last name.
McDermott.
McDermott, yes. Thank you. I think I get him confused with Marquand, and that's the director of Return of the Jedi, right? Marquand.
Yep.
Yes. So I get those names confused sometimes. But no, you got to imagine he was probably going over that line a million times in his head, doing multiple takes. You know, like he's a Sith Lord. He's a Sith Lord. He's a Sith Lord. You know, that kind of thing. Then Obi-Wan's like, Ewan McGregor's like, dude, let's just get through this. Yeah,
Samuel L. had a similar delivery of that too later in the movie. I thought you were talking about him.
A Sith Lord?
Sith Lord. His was better, of course. You know, Amy McDermott's like, you can't defeat him. He's a Sith Lord. It's like, oh, really? Well, how do you know about Sith Lords, Emperor? You're not the Emperor yet. I'm getting ahead of myself. Comparing movies to other movies, I don't agree with. And do I think this will be a lesson the sequel trilogy learned to the Star Wars fans, especially after The Mandalorian, which came out pretty much right at the release of Rise of Skywalker? I can't predict yes or no, but I will say I would hope that there is there's some consideration there from a lot of the more hardcore fans, especially the ones that got really, really, really fired up and upset with Last Jedi and with all the little diversity stuff like Kelly Marie Tran as Rose and things like that. Things that I felt were incredibly unfair and baseless and all that stuff. But again, that goes back into Palpatine's "it's only natural" thing. I think that actually has a little more meaning to it. It wasn't just a joke that I did. I mean, it actually, there's some truth to that. Like it is only natural, and also the context of that line delivery, which was coming from an evil Sith Lord. Like there is also, it's natural, but it also speaks to something very primal and very deeply vile in a lot of people, especially when something they love reaches that kind of fandom where it's not just a movie, it's not just a piece of art, it's now a lifestyle, it's now a religion, a cult, you know. And when it becomes something like that, things can get a little scary. You know, you can never meet those expectations of those people. You know,
it's all supposed to be fun. I mean, these
it's
are
supposed
movies.
to be fun. And you know, Force Awakens, fun. Last Jedi, fun and a bit of a thinker. It gives you a little something extra. Rise of Skywalker, completely bat crap bonkers, but fun nonetheless. I kind of like to compare Rise of Skywalker sometimes to friends of mine, and I say it's almost like Tony Scott's post Man on Fire phase.
Oh God, he was like doing Domino.
Yeah, I love Domino, dude.
I love it too, but it's not.
Yes. Finally, I find another fan of Domino. Yes, It's an insane movie, but it's like, dude, that movie was written by Richard Kelly, Donnie Darko, and you know, Tony Scott read that script and was like, you know what? Let's do acid film editing. I'm gonna take the celluloid, the print of the film. I'm gonna stomp on it. I'm gonna pour chemicals on it. I'm gonna cut it so friggin' fast you can't tell what's going on. And you know what? There's not a thing you can do about it because it's Sunday. You want to go to the movies, and this is the only thing playing, buddy. It's got Mickey Rourke in it, and you know you're going to see a Mickey Rourke movie. So
you know, it's only a movie that if it had been made in the mid '80s would have been made with a mountain of cocaine.
Yes. Oh well, are you sure it wasn't?
You know, you got me there.
There's still cocaine out there. I mean, maybe meth. Maybe meth is the thing now. I don't know. You know, but whatever the case is, drugs.
Lots of them.
Boom, And as we all know, drugs help fuel the best movies, like Stephen King's Trucker movie.
Oh God!
Or Truck movie, not Trucker, Trucks. Movie. Maximum Overdrive.
Oh my gosh!
I helped do a commentary track for that. Actually, it's not on a DVD or anything like that. This was just for fun, and this was a first time watch for me, and we just had a blast. Me and my friends watching that. It was like the craziest movie, and of course we were like, okay, where can you tell the Coke lines are at in the background or on the film strip itself or the camera lens? That whole movie was just painted with cocaine, and it's beautiful in that sense. It's not beautiful in terms of Stephen King's health at the time. You got to take that into consideration, or
a quality movie, but yeah,
or a quality movie, but again, going back to finding that little bit to latch onto, it's like, all right, this movie's incredibly insane. It's made by a madman.
Have you guys read Stephen King's autobiography?
Did he?
No, I'm a serious question. Like,
I have not.
It's very good. He speaks about his writing process as part of the book, but he also just talks about those stories and those times and how freaking drugged out of his mind he was in the early 80s.
It's part sad, but it's also part beautiful because he's still alive. So it's not like you can say the guy's heart exploded out of his chest. So now you can't say it's beautiful. No, it's still kind of beautiful in a way because he did that movie, Maximum Overdrive. We can talk about it now with all that being said in hindsight. And it's not a good movie, but it's a cult movie. It's a movie that you can kind of get behind. It's like it's not the little movie that could. It's the movie that was.
Right. Dave, was this on writing?
Yes.
Is that the name? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I read it. I remember it mostly because if you remember the movie 1308, that's where it comes out of.
Oh yeah.
That movie with John Cusack and Samuel L. Jackson about the evil hotel room.
The evil hotel room.
Yeah, he starts it up as a writing exercise in that book to show people his writing process, and then he just finished it as a short story, and then it's a movie with John Cusack and Samuel L. Jackson because he's Stephen King.
Yeah, he basically just craps out gold. Stephen King.
He's an alchemist, just like Alejandro Jodorowsky.
Yep, very much so.
He's exactly.
Yeah.
What were we talking about? Star Wars, I think.
Well, sure, yeah.
Sorry, my laughs are really weird when I get into a mood, man. Like I get really gravelly sometimes, and it's just I can't help it. I get really goofy.
It's all right. You're in the right place.
Yeah. What?
What I wanted to ask you, I'll let the other guys see, if there's anything else that you guys want to ask Bill, but
sure.
There's one thing I wanted to really kind of pick your brain about George Lucas, and really any of the directors of the Star Wars films, and obviously they have other works that they have done that are significant. And they have a great deal of influences that influence the work that they do as well in a Star Wars movie. So I kind of wanted to pick your brain a little bit about that. And it's like when you watch a movie like the original Star Wars, do you get a greater appreciation for the movie knowing what George's background looks like and what George's influences were?
Oh, you mean like Vision and their inspirations, things like that?
Yeah.
Yes, of course. Obviously as a kid, I didn't know a lot of those things, like the Kurosawa background or the Flash Gordon or the serials. I knew a little bit about serials growing up because I had Who Framed Roger Rabbit on VHS, and they included. In the movie, there was like a bit where they were watching newsreels, and I think that was a part of a film program in that movie where they were watching cartoon serials. And I was like, oh, they used to do stuff like that back then. That's pretty cool. It was like a whole day out, you know. It was pretty neat. It wasn't just 2 hours. It was like a whole event, which we were talking about earlier. But, you know, those days have passed. Or have they? You know, we don't know. But yes, it only furders your appreciation for them, and it also complicates things just a little bit. There was well, I want to say it was more like an essay movie, an essay film, or a film essay. I don't know what the proper genre title for this is, but it was a movie called Remix, or was it called Remix? It was like a Remix Manifesto, and it was all about copyright and also who owns what, does anyone own art, those kind of things. A little bit about piracy, you know, stuff like that, and how the digital landscape kind of changed things, you know, Napster and, you know, all the like LimeWire, that kind of stuff, DJ music, you know, sampling. And there was this wonderful bit where they went into, there was a band, I think it was, you know, they did that Bittersweet Symphony, and they borrowed a tune from the Rolling Stones, I believe, or the Rolling Stones made an argument that they took a tune from them. And so they won that court case, but then in this movie, the guy was like, well, actually, and then he traced it back from before the Rolling Stones to another band, and then traced it from that band to another band. And he was like making the argument that, you know, everything, you know, has like most things have a precedent. You know, there are very few things that are 100% truly original. It's almost like it takes a village. You know, have you heard that phrase? It takes a village, you know, to raise a child. It's kind of like that. Like, you're getting influence and information from all over the place, whether you know its context, whether you know it's where it came from or not. You're just getting it and you're absorbing it. You know, hopefully over time you'll recognize and understand. But even if you don't, I mean, I don't think that's a big deal. You know, if someone just brings it up to you, hey, this is kind of like that, you know. And you go, oh, wow, someone else did it. Okay. You know, but that doesn't necessarily change it. Did you do an exact replica, or was it like you were kind of doing your own take on it? You just didn't know, you know, your own interpretation of that little angle that you saw it at. And of course, everyone sees things differently. So of course your perspective is going to be different. George Lucas saw those movies, remember those movies very much like Spielberg. You know, Spielberg was inspired by those serials, those adventure movies, you know, serials, episodes, Flash Gordon, of course. But I believe there were also some really ones that no one, Mystery Science Theater may have done a couple episodes about that, like Crash of the Moons. That was one episode. That was based on serial series that was, what was the main character? Rocky Jones. He was like a space pilot, hero type, Han Solo-ish rogue kind of. But he was also an official, like, I guess, military guy or something. I don't know. So maybe not Han Solo. Han doesn't team up with people like that. He doesn't last long. He's a rogue. But what I'm saying is, yes, there's definitely a lot of appreciation, but also there's the argument to be made about, is anything original? And then, of course, there's the other argument to be made from that point where, okay, maybe it wasn't original, but maybe now it is original because you took it and did something different with it. So maybe now that you know it wasn't original, you can really mix things up. And, you know, that was Star Wars. That is still Star Wars, at least until even Rise of Skywalker, which a lot of people, you know, were like, oh, they're playing it safe. You know, they're going back to The Force Awakens in a way. And I was like, well, yes and no. You know, The Force Awakens kind of had more of a, it was a lot slower by comparison. They were actually taking their time to kind of introduce these new characters, character arcs, tell a story, you know, so on and so forth. Soft reboot, sure, but they were still, you know, doing the basic structure of a story. Rise of Skywalker, it's got no time to breathe. No, we gotta get this done with. You know, just right off the gate, Kylo Ren is storming these people. He's lightsabering people to death. Goes right into that crazy cave, you know, underground cave, mad scientist lab, where Palpatine's corpse has made clones of Snoke for some reason over time. He's like, I made him. I'm like, oh my god, this is crazy. And then it just goes from there. And Poe is like, immediately after that, Poe's like, our worst fears have come true. Palpatine is somehow still alive, or he says something to that effect. And then immediately it's a quest. But the quest doesn't have time to breathe. So there's no time to waste. There's an urgency, but the urgency is not built into the story. The urgency is just on the filmmaker's part. Let's just get this done. Let's move to the end. And in that, to that extent, it is not the same as The Force Awakens or The Last Jedi or the sequels, or the prequels or the originals. It is another whole new kind of Star Wars story. So, we can learn. I think filmmakers can definitely learn from the past, and they have to. I think there was a really interesting story about a mathematician who lived out in a village somewhere in Asia, I believe, and this was like a long time ago in a country far, far away. And he just walked out of a village, and he went to some bigger colony or city, and somehow saw a math equation, and he solved it immediately and became this world-renowned mathematician, I guess, and so I guess sometimes it just comes naturally to people. It's like in Good Will Hunting, when Will was explaining to his girlfriend, like, sometimes you just look at something and instantly it, you just got it. But that's very rare. With most filmmakers, they have been inspired by something, they have been influenced by something, usually other movies, and or television maybe, or books even, who knows, and cave paintings perhaps, and they take that and they want to do it again, but they saw it from a particular angle and perspective, whether that was within themselves or whether that was their surrounding, the smell in the air, the light in the around them, whatever it was, and now they've made it their own. Now, of course, this was a Disney movie. These are Disney movies now. I'm sure there was a lot of committee interference, we want this to happen. Can you throw this in there? We want that. We got to be real about it. But even within those parameters, there's still room for original storytelling. And so, yes, I think from that there is always going to be appreciation for these kind of movies, for these blockbusters, even ones that have almost completely exhausted whatever credit they had, and Star Wars can still, they can gain more credit, Mandalorian, I think that's now proven. You can continue the creativity, you can scale things back and get minimal and just do nuts and bolts, biscuits and gravy, kind of storytelling, and boom, go off to the races.
I think like the contrast was stark when we talked about that when you're watching Mandalorian and you're watching Rise of Skywalker at the same time. And Mandalorian, like you said, bare bones, stripped down, very personal story, versus this huge, colossal mess of a quest film, like you said, just completely polar opposite. And I think, like, for me anyway, the approach to The Mandalorian was very welcome at the time. And Fredo, I think you were going to say something.
Yeah, no, I was going to ask Bill, and this maybe, we're talking about Disney, we're talking about Star Wars, and how much do you weigh the individual aspect of each movie versus as part of a series?
I weigh it probably I weigh it more than the series as a whole. Although I guess you could say the trilogies are kind of their own, little series in the scape of things, the grand vision of things, because obviously the prequels, the originals, they're almost their own arcs. They are their own arcs. There was never really as far as I know, a plan totally to do more than just the original 3. I think that it was kind of more of a gimmick. Like George Lucas made A New Hope, and it was just called Star Wars at first. And then it was only like maybe a little bit after that, he was like, oh, you know what? I'm going to go back to this other idea. We're just going to throw episode 4, A New Hope, on there as kind of a homage to those serials. And until someone maybe brought it up, you know, like, hey, is there going to be an episode 5? And then he was like, oh, you know what? Let's make this a series, you know, and we'll do 2 more. And then it just kind of snowballed from there, and for better and worse, or for worse and better, you know, however you want to look at it. And I definitely would put the trilogies in their own mini series. As far as the entire series as a whole, I would not bother trying to put it all together in terms of one long story, one long-term story that has kind of like a season, you know. Or no, actually, this would be more like a series. Each season would be the trilogies, I guess. But so this is a 3-season show, I suppose. But if that's the case, then this is a bad show. Or it's like American Horror Story, which isn't a bad show, but I'm just saying, like, each season is completely different. It's like a whole new setup.
Right.
You know, there's little continuation. There is continuation, but it's very, you know, subtle and or maybe not subtle. Maybe it's just completely crazy, but it's there. And so I would, personally speaking, give more weight to the individual impact of each single movie over how they are as a whole. I actually would rather think of them as that. There is that link, of course, continuity-wise, and it's good to take things in as a whole, like, wow, these kind of flow really well into each other. But then once you start having that mentality, you start seeing there's some awkwardness in there. You know, like, for example, from The Last Jedi to Rise of Skywalker, it's like a hard cut. You know, it's like there was a record skip. You know, like it's just like it doesn't fit. It's a puzzle piece that you just jammed together.
You know, but I guess I would argue one side of that if the reason for a trilogy or the thought behind a trilogy is that whole idea of a 3-act play or an opera, and you have first act, second act, third act. Sure. And so if you're going to design it in that, if you're going to keep embracing that concept, then those 3 acts have to link together as one overall story. Otherwise, it's going to be like, you know, the Marvel movies where, I mean, yeah, eventually they all get to Endgame, you know, but, you know, they're all, you can watch one Marvel movie and be fine with not seeing the other Marvel movies. You know
sure,
what I mean?
They are kind of like, they are basically, they're not kind of, they are comic books in that I could pick up an issue of Superman, not know where it takes place, in what world, in what universe, in what iteration of that universe, if it's a remake, if it's a revisit, whatever. And it's basically its own story right there. You know, I used to actually collect Superman issues. This was when Superman was going through his electro blues Superman phase, where he would phase in and out of buildings as opposed to just flying like a person. And or as a Kryptonian, and I actually kind of liked that look at the time. I thought that was kind of crazy, you know. But I could pick up an issue, and they would start and end. There would be little similar things here and there that they continued from the other issues, but for the most part, it was something you could pick up and then set back down, and it's fine. I think the same can also be said for the Star Wars movies. It, individually speaking, it definitely helps to have seen the others big time. And I think you can say the same about the MCU movies, just as you had said a moment ago. You can start with Captain America, the Winter Soldier, if you wanted to, because it kind of, within the movie, sums up who these characters are. This is like within the opening 20 minutes, sums up who these characters are, their dynamics with each other, where they've been, and then, of course, where they're going and what the threat is and what the conflict is going to be. And then, of course, the mid-credit stingers, when those come in, it's like, oh, there's more to this. Well, maybe I need to watch the other movies. Maybe I need to go on, you know. So if it's good enough, it entices you to see the others. And of course, it doesn't have to work that way. It can work really in a multitude of ways. But yes, within its own movie, there's the 3-act structure. Within the trilogy, it's also kind of like a 3-act structure. And I guess in a 9-act movie, I mean, is that a thing? I mean, I don't know. I guess that would be, 3 trilogies. All right. 1, 2, 3. Wow. Okay. But it gets really confusing and contradictory because it's like, okay, each trilogy has its own dark place, 2nd act, and it's like, so which trilogy is the darker act?
I was just thinking about that. Like the original trilogy isn't the darkest act, and it's the middle section.
It's the middle section, so it kind of exponentially. Once you get to that point, then you kind of realize you realize 2 things. One, that this was never established or set up to be that long of a series, and that's fine. It just became this big thing, and that's great. But let's not pretend that this was some big scheme. This big thought out process. Like, oh, I'm going to do all these movies. And 2, time is but a construct.
Yeah, I think what Aaron's getting
that's a
at,
joke. That's a joke, by the way.
Yeah.
Well, not a joke. Actually, that might actually be. But go ahead. It's fine.
Time is a flat circle. But one of the things Aaron, I think's getting at is like we're talking about this whole this devotion to doing a trilogy.
Yeah.
And it doesn't necessarily have to go that way, as the MCU has demonstrated. You just tell interesting stories and connect them in whatever way you think makes the most sense. And we all struggled with Rise of Skywalker, and I think part of the reason was it felt like 3 movies stuffed into one. And it's like, what if you had broken it into 2 movies? Or what if you had never painted yourself into a corner in the first place and said, this is going to be a trilogy, and it's always going to be a trilogy going on forever and ever? I think it's like kind of an arbitrary thing that they're forcing upon themselves at this point. Like you said, to your point, there's 9 movies now. It's like, is there any reason to continue to do it that way?
Well, technically, there's no reason to continue, but there's also no reason not to continue. If these movies are obviously, the box office takes have been going down, so it's like, is it still worth it? But at the same time, Mandalorian has kind of revived things a bit, which was surprising. I think everyone was like, Rise of Skywalker, that's going to be, those are the expectations. These movies are going to be huge. And then they steadily went down from Force Awakens to Last Jedi and then eventually Rise of Skywalker. But Mandalorian, there's still that spark. There's still that spark of creativity that can come out of all of this. Let's maybe think outside the box a bit within certain parameters, but maybe let's break those parameters. Why do we have to do it in a trilogy? And for the longest time as a Star Wars fan, I used to think if they're going to do a prequel series, it has to be a trilogy, because then the originals were a trilogy. This has to be a trilogy. I was all about structure and order for the longest time, because I am legitimately someone who is diagnosed with obsessive compulsive disorder, and I'm all about structure. Things have to be placed just right in my room, even if my room is a complete chaos mess. You know what I mean? I know that dirty towel that's growing mold is in the right place, in the right position, with the right aroma that is horrible. And if someone comes into my room, I will know, because if that is out of place, that's the indicator. So for the longest time, that was my thing. But I've grown out of that, and I feel like there can be structure and chaos and structure, and what does it matter either way? Ultimately, like the world is open. You can do all sorts of different things with these stories. It's Red Letter Media, the dudes behind Mr. Plinkett, the awesome Mr. Plinkett Star Wars prequel reviews. And now sequel reviews. I guess they got to do Rise of Skywalker, which I know they're going to have a blast doing. Right. But no, I guess what I'm getting at is with those, Rich Evans, famous Rich Evans, said something to the effect of the Star Wars galaxy is not very big. This isn't a story that has a lot of legs. They didn't think that through into this. It can only go so far. I very much disagree with that. I think there are so many places to go to. And if anything, the sequel trilogy kind of, and you could argue, all these different things, but I think you can make the argument that yes, it showed that you can do all sorts of crazy stuff with this world, with this universe, or rather with this galaxy. You can go to another galaxy if you want. It's still technically a Star Wars. You can explore. I mean, they're in one galaxy. I mean, you know how friggin' big the universe is. Obviously, the movies don't play to. It's not like we're watching Interstellar, where there's kind of some science to it, relativity, all that good stuff, gravity, but it's still like, okay, what's happening in this galaxy? What's happening a long time ago, even further and further away? Or what's happening longer ago? What's happening further in the future? There's so many. Those are just examples, but I mean, you can explore weird characters. Like, what about that weird worm-looking guy? And I could be talking about an assortment of weird creatures and monsters that look like worms. I guess the one I'm specifically bringing up is the hammerhead one in the Mos Eisley Cantina that you see with the little. No, in A New Hope. Who's got the little butt? He's got the little butthole mouth, and he's like, his language is like.
Oh yeah.
I don't want to say what that sounds like, knowing that his mouth looks like a butthole, but granted, that character always stood out to me. I was like, who is he? Is that a he? Is it a she? Is it something else? Is it something we don't know? Does it fall into whatever category? Is it a soldier? Is it just some dude that likes to hang out at this weird bar? I mean, what is it? And those are other stories. In that movie, it worked as what it was. And that what he was, and that he was used as color, basically, as background flavor. It was just, wow, this is a really weird cantina. Mm-hmm. I am far away from Kansas. I mean, by Moisture Farm. So you can take it and go in so many different directions. It doesn't have to be a trilogy. It doesn't have to be this. It doesn't have to be that. It can be anything, and I think there's nothing wrong with hiring J.J. Abrams to do a space movie. He did it with Star Trek. He did it with Star Wars. It's a little weird. It's a little on the nose, but whatever. He's good at it. Rian Johnson, clearly good at it. I would have gone with a different director for the third one. They didn't, but that's fine. Whatever. They went with the safe bet. Now, Mandalorian, I think that's showing you can bring in all sorts of different crew people. You can go for the stars. The sky is not even the limit. There is no limit. No limits, like Master P.
Well, I think that's an excellent point to maybe conclude on. That's and that's neat where Star Wars is going. Bill, we want to thank you so much for all of your insight, all of your thoughts, and great stories and everything, and being an awesome guest on the
thank you guys too, man. I mean, when I heard about this podcast way back, I mean, I think this was around the time when I heard of it. I heard of there's a Simpsons podcast too in New Orleans, and I love those guys too. And we have the Darth Vader Saints fans. What was it? What's his name? Saints Darth Vader or Saints Vader, or am I thinking too far into it?
No, Saint Vader. Yeah.
I like the idea of that guy. I've never met the real person, but I like that character. I like the Legion. I like the crew of Chewbacca's. I love all these different things that combine with this kind of city that is New Orleans is a galaxy far, far away. It very much fits that mold. It's not Smallville. Nothing against Smallville. Smallville's great,
so
but it's not Smallville.
So, Bill, how can people find you online? You mentioned Twitter a couple times. How can people?
Oh, yeah. Okay, so I am on Twitter at, of course, you have to use the at symbol, Bill, Bill, reviews. All one word. It's not one word, but it is one word in Twitter, on Twitter. And I'm on Instagram, same place, at Bill Reviews. I have begun writing a blog on medium.com called, and this is kind of an esoteric name, Rogue Sagan, kind of like Carl Sagan, Rogue-Sagan. It's medium.com/Rogue-Sagan. I think my next review is going to be, it's going to be a movie called Spree, made by one of my favorite filmmakers of now, Eugene Kotlarenko. It's a movie about social media and a madman who is trying to get as many likes as possible by killing as many people as possible while being an Uber driver.
Well, okay.
So not exactly Star Wars, but it starts with an S.
Oh, cool.
So it's kind of a little bit like that. He's not riding a cruiser, but it is,
Well, again,
fine.
thank you very, very much. And as always, everybody's listening. You can find us on Podbean, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts. We're also on Twitter. What's our Twitter handle, Dave?
I think it's Whodad Jedi P, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it is.
I'm sure if you search for Whodad Jedi, you'll find us. But we're often bantering about Star Wars on there on Twitter, and like I said, we're also on Facebook. So yeah, please listen, share, like, do whatever. And if you have some ideas for us for shows, you can tweet them at us. We'll, we're not too proud to beg, as TLC said. With that, we will wish everybody a great and safe another week in this wonderful pandemic, and we'll see you on the next episode of the Whodad Jedi podcast. With that, we'll say
Whodad.
Whodad.
And have a good weekend, everybody. Week, whatever. Have a good one.
May the force be with all of you.
McConkey.